Hi, friends. Welcome. We are doing another installment of our conversations with midwives around the world. It's such crazy times we live in, and we are experiencing, for the first time ever, just isolation and self-isolation, community isolation. And we are experiencing this all together as an entire world. So this is really very unique times. And more than ever, we need to feel connection, and we need to feel like we're not alone. And so I'm so excited to be able to host these get-togethers in our digital space to connect with each other, to really experience our shared humanity. So when I start these, I always say, let's just start with like a nice deep breath and just ground in our space. So join me now if you'd like to, and just breathe where you are. Let the anxiety just drift away. Let the fear of the day drift away, and come into full awareness of your body in this time and space. Seeing a lot of increased need. And one of the things we're going to talk about tonight with the midwife Tani from Australia is how communities are preparing and how we as midwives can prepare best. So it's really powerful work that all these midwives are doing, and coming together is just so important. So I want to just say a big hi to everyone who's joining now. Welcome. It's so good to see you all on the call. Go ahead and just wave to each other, wave to me, be a part of it all, and just feeling like we're all connected. So that's great. So I am going to bring our lovely midwife Tani in. Hopefully, she can say hello to us. Let's see. There it is. It's working. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. We made it.
Yay.
Yeah. So can you hear us okay? Everything's good?
I can hear you. I just, I look green.
Great. Well, you have low lighting in your space. So
yeah.
It's okay. We see you. You look lovely. How are you?
Really well. How are you? Welcome to Australia.
Thank you. It's crazy times,
Under
right?
very odd circumstances. Yeah.
Very odd. I didn't know I was going to be here even just a week ago. It's so crazy.
Yeah. So now you're in lockdown.
Well, Australia is not locked its states from each other, so I could travel in Australia, but the border, there's no international flight.
Okay. Yeah. So come to the East Coast.
Yeah, I might do that.
Okay.
Because I don't really have a plan.
Sure. We've got lots of babies too, so we could use you.
Okay, maybe we'll figure something out. Well,
okay.
I'm really excited to make connection with you, and just so happy that you're willing to talk with the community of midwives around the globe who are really all searching for connection and some guidance and some leadership, because these are just really bizarre times.
Yeah.
So first of all, big welcome, big thank you. Will you tell us where you are in the world and
sure.
How you are? What's going on where you are?
Okay. So I actually live almost 2 hours north of Brisbane, which is on the east coast of Australia. I live in a very small country town. We have a tennis court, but we don't even have any shops where I live. So it's a very, very small community. And already within the last 48 hours, I've been added to 2 small Facebook community pages with people offering to help elderly neighbours and people with small children. And honestly, it's just amazing how incredible the community comes together. So everybody's willing to help, and that's lovely. So I do live quite rurally, but I actually work in a neonatal unit at a very large hospital as well. And I'm a private midwife. So I work in the home birth setting primarily. And I've still kind of got a lot of connections within the hospital system. So over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of things unfolding, and the women are telling me that their appointments are changing from an in-house appointment to a phone appointment. There's antenatal classes prenatal classes being shut down. Women are looking for alternatives, so they're looking for online classes, they're looking for support from anywhere. And if pregnancy at times can be quite isolating, especially when you've got a toddler as well. And there are women who are saying they're worried that they're not going to have visitors for the next 3-4 months, and they're isolated. There's a lot of women in our communities that don't drive. There's a lot of socioeconomic issues that mean that, perhaps their community family mother gathering was their only outing, once a week or once a month. And now that's finished. So, it's a really big concern as to how do we support women who are in isolation, who are pregnant, and everybody celebrates once the baby arrives, right? And that's an ongoing thing as well, is that often women find that they spend so much time in the pregnancy, they're, looking after other children, and then everybody celebrates the baby, but the mothers aren't feeling supported. So it's a bit of a concern.
Yeah, that is a concern. Do you know, are there cases in your area yet? What is the risk to the disease?
Sure. So, Australia is a massive country, but we only have, a few people, really. I think the latest count was something around 680 cases. And we've had, unfortunately, 6 deaths in Australia to date. We've had a couple of cases very locally to me, and I think they've been really well handled, but my understanding is perhaps once people recover, maybe there's not a lot of support, and that's a bit of a concern, because you don't want, especially families, to feel, like maybe they're treated like a leper. They particularly know what to do after that. So we don't know what happens once somebody's been had the virus and recovered. We just don't have that information yet. So nobody really knows what to do.
So much still that we're all learning. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, and a couple of
I have a
studies.
Specific...
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the couple of studies that came out of China about the pregnant women who had their babies, and the babies were then tested and so forth. It's such a small study, and I think it gets touted around the media so much. And reality is, I think that the first study was 7 women, and 6 of them were cesareans. And they're saying, well, baby didn't contract the virus. However, there are rumors that perhaps women are going into they're having their babies early, but we now know that they're scheduled cesareans.
Right.
So it's irrelevant, and it's all, fear-inducing stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And how do we sort out the rhetoric and the fear-mongering from the truth? And there's just, how do you even publish in the midst of a pandemic? So it's so hard to get the information, which is why I think these conversations are so important. So one of the questions I had for you, Tani, that I feel like you're really poised to answer so well is you've worked both in the home and the hospital and the first world in a developing country. Like, you've had a lot of broad experience. What would you say, or how would you advise midwives around the globe who suddenly have an increased request for community-based birth, home birth or birth center? How would you recommend the midwives go about assessing who's really appropriate, who's not, those critical risk assessments, especially when we have late transfers to care? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I guess the number one thing at the beginning of your question is how do midwives handle this current climate? And number one is they have to stay well themselves. And really, it sounds awful, but don't overburden yourself, because you can't give good care if you take on too much. So
true.
I think there are women who are very, very capable of looking after themselves in a way where if they are birthing in hospital, they know the best thing for them to do is to get home again as soon as possible.
Yeah.
There's other women who are going to be a little bit more complex and they're going to need more midwifery care. But there's also other birth workers that can step into that space and help as well.
Yeah.
I think, the biggest thing that I come across is a lot of fear-mongering. And midwives are scared of perhaps stepping over a line, right? But we're not restricted by hospital policy, but there is, there's certain things that we can do to, make those pathways a little bit easier for ourselves. And I think a really important thing is making sure that we've got a really good agreement in place with all the pathways and all the care providers, so that there's good relationships there, so that, in case of transfer, the path is smoother for everybody. So it's just really important that I just think that being really transparent with our care and expectations and collaborating with the woman and being just clear about what we are able to do and what we're not able to do, and everybody taking responsibility for the risks.
Yeah, exactly.
Because as much as we want to support women to do, to have these amazing births, we just, it's also really important to reiterate with women that we can't continue to help women if we cross too many boundaries, if you get my drift.
Yeah. No, I really do. I've said that oftentimes to midwives who are talking to me about what they should do. I just keep saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. So don't get empty. You must fill your own reservoir. You must sleep. You must eat. You must take your immunoboosting herbs. You have to have time with your family. And, you have to take a break. And so hopefully they're heeding that. But the other point that it feels like you're making, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know there's a little breaking up with the audio, so hopefully I'm hearing you right, that it's also really about having boundaries with themselves, with who they take in care. Like, we want to help everyone, but there will be some people who call based on fear-mongering that really are not appropriate for community-based birth. Would you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's right. Sure. I mean, we have pathways in Australia. So we have consulting guidelines and we have categories. So unfortunately, women are categorized into A, B, and C. So A is a green light, red is, B is an orange light, so to consult, and C is, a big red sign, which, sometimes they also can be about consulting. And they're pretty strict. I think the main thing is just that open communication. So, there's just a lot going on as well with free birth communities and, women prepared to birth themselves. And I know Professor Hannah Dahlen in Sydney has just released a book about birthing outside the system. And I mean, that stuff is, maybe it's based in fear, but maybe it's based in empowerment, because perhaps these women have just had an incredible birth with a midwife at home and feel completely fine with birthing themselves. And inevitably, it's not illegal, it's a woman's choice. So we're here to help women birth. There is a scope that's probably going to widen over the next however long this goes on. But I think women have to come to the party and be prepared to really boost their education, and we have to be prepared to definitely get busier and prioritize those care. So in keeping yourself well, you're going to be able to help more people. So that's sort of hopefully true in all situations, but especially now.
Yeah, I love that. I want to make this graphic that's like, actually the midwife has to be in the center, and then she can take care of the mamas, and then she can take care of the families. But if she spends all of her time in the periphery, she will actually have no core left for her own nourishment and self. So I totally agree with you. I'm always saying this: put the oxygen mask on yourself first. You can't serve anyone else if you're dying.
Yeah.
So yeah. All those
that's true. But I think we really need to look locally and have a look at our community and who is in our immediate community, because there are midwives all over Australia, very, very skilled individuals, whether they work for a hospital or not, who can still step into their community, regardless of whether they're employed by, the health system or not.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can't still sidestep a little. And I guess it goes for every profession. But it's not really about the dollars in your pockets right now. It's about looking after the people that are in your street.
And one of the best ways to look out for some of those people is, let's get you to the hospital. And this is the piece that I feel like I'm trying to communicate around, especially areas like in the US and partly in Australia, where midwifery care has been marginalized. It's been not mainstream. The instinct is to just care and care and care. But not only does that exhaust you, but it actually opens you up for really big risk, because not all women should birth in the community. And figuring out that risk assessment of who is safe and who is not, I think, like you made the point, like, don't abandon your risk assessment criteria. Don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're out of the game, that's it. You can't help anyone else.
Yeah, exactly. Well, gosh, do you have any recommendations you want to give the midwives around the world? Do you have any comments or preparation or tricks or techniques or just anything you want to share with us?
I just think reach out to each other is massive. There are midwives you work with, you trained with, you met once, you were on a beautiful conference with, maybe you just were passing ships, but they're your community. And I have just an epic community of midwives that I've met along the way, and they're and they're all over the world. Like I trust them like sisters, and there's very select crew of people around the world that know what you're experiencing. So, there's always someone awake. So reach out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be my biggest tip.
Awesome. Well, one of the things that's starting to happen in the US that I'm hopefully going to do a video on soon is whole communities of midwives are changing their practice structure radically in order to provide essentially group care together in a way that they never have, because the numbers are increasing so dramatically, so quickly, and because if one of them falls ill, the whole community would help and support. So do you have ideas for that? Can you tell us anything that's happening around that perspective?
Yeah, sure. Well, personally, I work independently. But independently, but in partnership as well. So, in particularly, there's a midwife that I work with, and we just bounce off each other constantly. And I know that happens often. Like, I find that independent midwives usually gel with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and perhaps in a structured business structure as such. It's about sort of creating your own little family. So that would be one thing. I would say, look, just what I've experienced is usually they're a pretty generous bunch, and
I know, right? Midwives are my favorite kind of person.
yeah, and they just keep going. And I'm a little bit concerned about one of the comments that just jumped up there about some midwives in Iran who have have recently passed away.
Yeah,
that's just shocking. And I guess across the board we're going to see things like that happening.
Which is why your beginning advice is so important. Take care of yourself. You must take care of yourself first, midwives. That's just the most important. So thank you for that keen guidance there.
Yeah.
Welcome. Well, let's shift over into the physical. Do you have actual practice suggestions or guidelines? Do you have anything you want to share there?
Yeah, we're kind of getting to that at the moment. Everybody where I live is starting to make their own hand sanitizer and kind of go back to basics and look at their disposables and look at their just the practicalities around being in people's houses. So obviously we're asking, is everybody well? And it is going to get to a point where we're looking after unwell people. And at that point, and we've really only started talking about it in the last couple of days, what do we do? Are we prepared to do it? What do is this baby being born and the first thing they see is a mask and a person in a zoot suit? I don't even know what they're called. I call them a zoot suit, the white hams out or something.
Yeah.
What kind of trauma is that going to lead to with these babies in 20 years' time? That's the first thing they see. I don't even have the brain capacity to deal with that right now. But yeah, it's protecting yourself. So, do you take a lab coat? Do you wear an outfit over the top of your outfit? Do you take a change of clothes? How do you protect yourself in this situation when you're not in a facility that has hand sanitizer on the end of every single cabinet and so forth? I honestly don't know. It's everybody's making up rules, but I think
I don't think so. Yeah.
And as soon as we figure it out, just share it, because I don't know where I read that, whether it was on your page or not, but are we stockpiling information from each other?
Yeah. I've been talking about that hoarding information is the very worst thing we could do right now. So this is why we're doing these conversations. So thank you so much. One of the conversations that's been going around recently in some of the groups that I'm in is, what about water birth? Are we increasing the potential vector for infection for the provider?
Right.
Should we allow water labor but not water birth, so we're not sticking, our arms and sometimes our breasts and our face in the tub trying to help shoulders or something? Like what are our recommendations? I mean, in my mind, I always had the old, the solution to pollution is dilution. You remember this old saying? So in my mind, like when we were talking about GBS or E. coli, something like that, like water birth can be safer in a lot of ways because it's so diluted as opposed to really concentrated. Maybe that's not true though with COVID. How do we even find out? Do you have any comments there?
So a snorkel and a mask?
Yeah.
I mean,
you just, I love it.
You can't.
I know.
But, even today I was unpacking a box with my colleague, and she was saying, we've got the long gloves, the veterinary ones that go up past the elbows. I was like, I have never stayed dry with those gloves on anyway.
The water gets in them, and then you're like pouring water down your armpit. It's terrible. They're just the worst. You know what? Like, one part of me is like, look, do we just risk it because we're going to get it anyway? But I know that's really not. I've been thinking the same thing. I know, that's not the recommendation. It's not a public health recommendation.
Yeah. Dear world, pay no attention to the last comment.
I know, right? No, I love it though. But I mean, the estimates are that 70 to 80% of the population are going to pass through this, and that people who are under 50 are unlikely to be severely ill. But how do we process this? I have heard some comments recently that some of the younger midwives in the community are saying that the older midwives should stop attending births for this reason, that they're more at risk. And I think each community has to support each other in the best way, but these are one of those risk-based assessments that we all need to be making. And statistically, the numbers out of Wuhan and Italy seem to indicate that it's dramatically more dangerous the older you get. And that under 40, the risk of death when contracting it is 0.2%.
Okay.
But in your 70s, it can be 14%.
Yeah.
So it's dramatically more dangerous the older you get. And so the idea is that older midwives should stop continuing to see new patients and therefore putting themselves at risk. But how do you stop serving when there's need, and how do you not show up? I mean, I think this is one of those questions.
And I was talking to my mum earlier as well, and she's approaching that age, and she retired from being a nurse of 40 odd years recently, and she was just sort of on that trajectory of like not so much don't tell us what like not to do, but more we're going to continue to do what we love because it's quality of life and so forth. However, I guess the thing that scares the powers that be, the big facilities, are who's liable. And I know WA Health is just, Western Australia, has just put out an announcement. If anybody would like to come back to work, the retired nurses, we'd be very happy to have you call this number. And I sent that through to my mum, and she went, I'm hanging up my phone and locking the door. So I guess it depends on, I guess it depends on the individual, right?
Yeah.
And as far as midwives are concerned, I guess it really depends on country and from working in different places, you know, there's different levels of commitment as well. And some women, it's their livelihood, it's their passion, it's their reason for being. So to take that away from them
would be a kind of death. Yeah.
Yeah. It's up to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, Robin is on our call tonight, and she's just mentioning a few things. I've heard that the one infected infant in the UK was hospitalized in a separate ward in a separate hospital than its mother. We've heard that these Chinese scheduled cesarean babies were separated from their mothers. It just flies in the face of everything we know midwifery is that actually skin to skin for everything, for infection, for exhaustion, for trauma, for everything. It resolves everything to be together. So maybe that's kind of our focus as a community as a profession is to try to get our knowledge and our statistics and our research in front of the powers that be so that we stop seeing these separations on a broad scale. How do we go about doing that? What are your ideas there? Like, how can we change this?
Oh, look, unless it's the campaigning is focused on keeping mothers and babies together. But, yeah, I mean, to try and get any kind of research out now that's any different to what we've had in the past, we can't do it because this is all so new. But everybody knows mother and baby together regardless, right? I guess...
Well, I think the obstetrical world doesn't seem to know this, but I think midwives do.
Look, I think that many obstetricians understand... they understand the physiology of putting a baby on a chest and, you know, breastfeeding commences and all the pathways and so forth. But I think if we're looking at... And this is what I was trying to understand today in the reading that I was doing was like, what are the circumstances where a baby would actually be separated from a mother? So you're talking about a mother in ICU or, you know, intensive care. Or, you know, something happens to baby or, you know, perhaps they have to be airlifted off. And it's nothing to do with COVID-19. It's simply a transfer. But I think in those instances, then you've got... you know, two separate individuals in different sorts of isolation and bringing them back together is going to be really complicated. So there has to be some sort of pathway or something in line now. And we are the ones that have to advocate for them to be brought back together at all times. So.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other thing I was thinking of
we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot going on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well. So I'm just hoping that all remains a possibility.
Yeah. Well, the World Health Organization that published just recently said that they haven't been able to detect it in any breast milk yet. So the recommendation is to keep breastfeeding now.
Yeah.
But we don't have any studies yet, of course.
No.
Well, gosh, so much still to figure out. Thank you for being on the front lines in your community. And thank you so much for coming and talking to the community. I appreciate you so much. I hope we can stay in touch. Aside from all of this crazy COVID information and preparation, you are also a community-based midwife who does almost exclusively home birth. Yeah?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
In Brisbane, Australia. And you're also have a master's in public health and are a researcher. So we'll look forward to more things for you coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your connection and communication.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And thanks for the work that you're doing.